demonstration here. Please remove this because it's for Windows, not for Mac.
All right, hello everyone. So what I'm going to do with our Zoom session today, we're going to talk about the short essay criteria, and I have it here on your screen. I'm going to get it on the projector for us here in the classroom as well. And this essay is due on March 1st. That's the due date for the final version of it. So we're coming to the end of January, which means over the course of the next month, you're going to be working on this. So the assignment is a 3 to 5 page common ground essay. Let me get the door. Okay, so I want to start by talking about what common ground actually means. Common ground is an objective, a goal for this essay, and it means that you're going to argue for a position in a way that considers opposing views and tries to reach a solution most likely to address the concerns of that opposition. And this is a little bit different than classical argument, where your goal is, largely to persuade an audience, and one of the methods you use in that situation is to discredit an opposing side. And in this method, you are considering opposing views and acknowledging some of the benefits of their position while also advocating for your own. So just as a way of a practical example, if I'm wanting to argue that motorcycle helmets should be required. Anyone riding a motorcycle by law needs to wear a helmet. And you think about how would you support an argument like that? I would try to show that it's safer, that I could have a lot of data to support that, and all of that's fine. Well, then you think about, why does someone oppose this view? Most people would not oppose it because they say that it's not safer. They would oppose it out of some kind of desire for more liberty and personal freedoms, that we shouldn't have all these laws telling us what to do. If someone wants to take the risk, then they should be able to do that. So that would be their opposing view. And what you would do is you would try to acknowledge that these kinds of personal freedoms are important, and you would maybe point out areas where you're advocating for more freedoms. Now, you still are not going to concede this point, because you are trying to argue that these helmets should be required. But instead, you're going to try to appeal a little bit differently to them, and maybe you could focus on the cost savings of insurance rates going down, or something like that. And ultimately, you're going to emphasize that you understand the desire for less government intrusion on our lives, but there's a certain benchmark of issues of public health where we should at minimum have some basic standards, and that helmets do meet that threshold. Okay, so you are focused on not really adapting your position for a kind of middle ground, but acknowledging instead that the audience opposing view has merit. So if you were arguing about something like gun control, people get these really entrenched viewpoints on it, and common ground can be difficult. But you could find situations, someone who is the most ardent defender of the Second Amendment would probably agree that people convicted of certain crimes should not have access to just any kind of firearms that they want, that there would be restrictions, that we have rights. There's plenty of examples of rights being curtailed in certain situations. So that's another strategy, is to take the argument, make it specific enough to ultimately meet that threshold. So if someone's concerned, for example, if the major topic and the focus, again, social issues and problems, meaning you can write about almost anything that you want to, but let's say that someone is really concerned about government waste, and they feel like the government should not fund things like National Endowment for the Arts or Humanities, that public money should not be used for the arts. Like that's their argument, because they're arguing that it's wasteful. Okay, so that's an opposing view. Let's say I'm trying to argue that we should, in fact, support the arts, and I could have these reasons that it creates jobs. In terms of government spending, it's much more efficient and well accounted for than a lot of government programs. The money goes directly to support local artists and local writers, and so it's something that directly benefits our communities. This isn't some federal program where nobody sees where all of this money is going. Okay, so I make my case there. Well, I still haven't really addressed the opposing side and their focus on government waste. So what I would do is I would agree that the government wastes a ton of money, but I would then point out that these particular programs that they mention are not the best example of that. The amount of money that taxpayers spend on this is, depending on which one you're talking about the cost of a postage stamp per year per taxpayer. So every taxpayer is paying like 41 cents per year for these programs, as opposed to, you point anything else out in defense or, other subsidies, other things that you could focus on where there is actually much more waste there. And the accounting errors that happen, where the government just loses track of billions of dollars, and it just kind of disappears into thin air. So what I'm doing in that is I'm addressing the validity of their concern, but attempting to kind of redirect their focus off of this one issue onto something that illustrates their point in what I think is a better way. So that's kind of the frame of mind that you're in. And in this particular essay, it's going to be 3 to 5 pages. You're going to need to use academic scholarly sources. This means that you should not just use Google for what you're writing about, but you're going to actually use the library databases. The steps you're going to follow, we are at the kind of initial stages of this where you're thinking critically about the issue you want to write about. You're going to utilize aspects of the writing process from discovery to editing. I'm going to have a class activity posted this week. It's a discussion board where you're just going to propose some initial ideas on a topic, and over the next several weeks, we will do some drafting. I don't have a formal draft submission folder. What we do instead is you build the project through the discussion boards, and you'll post your draft there, and that's where I'll actually comment on it. I'll show you that over the next several weeks. And I do usually do conferencing. Now, in this course, because it's a Zoom class, this conferencing will take place either in person or online. So I will have class time set aside for this. And in that class time, I'll meet with the students who are here, and I'll also be available to meet with you individually. We'll probably go ahead and use Zoom to facilitate that. So basically, I'll have the Zoom classroom open. You will pop in, and we'll discuss through audio or chat the progress of your essay. So you'll get my feedback there, and then we'll have some a revision process. I do recommend the writing lab here on campus. It's in the humanities building on the first floor. I do some hours there. You also have the option of using tutor.com for your projects. There is a link to that on the left toolbar. You can see tutor.com there. You access that through this platform. You have a number of free hours there. So okay, so just to recap, you're going to write an issue or an essay on a controversial issue where your goal is to pursue a common ground solution. You're never going to find a solution that's going to make everyone happy, but instead of just having a really entrenched position that you advocate for, this involves a process of reaching out to the opposing side, finding elements of their position that you find persuasive, and adapting your position to address those concerns. So if you're writing about gun control and you're very much a gun rights advocate, an interpretation of the Second Amendment that emphasizes individual rights to own firearms and all that, like you're an avid hunter and all of that, you can be passionate about your position. But think about the opposing view, and the opposing view's emphasis on public safety. How does your position help address their concerns? That's the question you would have to answer. And the same is true if you're arguing the opposing side. Okay, so I leave these topics fairly open. I will tell you that you have to keep in mind this common ground goal. So if you were going to write about like abortion, for example, where's the common ground going to occur? That's the main question I would ask you, because when you're dealing with the pro-life, pro-choice sides of that, that argument is organized in such a way, and the issue is such that there's not a lot of common ground there between those two opposing sides. So you're going to have to adjust how you think about that topic to do that, where maybe you think about family planning more generally than the same. And the same is true for the death penalty. I mean, a lot of people are either kind of for or against it. I mean, some people are for it in only certain situations, but again, think about criminal justice reform more broadly, and you might find more common ground there. So your topic selection is very important, and I will be participating in that process. When you propose potential topics, I'll approve each one, and then you can get started with the research side. Okay, so that is what the essay is about. The readings this week, I assigned 2 short stories, and I want to talk about what kind of why I assign those and what I'm wanting you to get out of them. So I assigned the story Araby by James Joyce and A&P by John Updike. And this week, you had a quiz over Araby, you'll have a quiz over A&P. And the stories are often paired because they're similar in one respect, and that is that they're talking about a narrator looking back on a kind of formative event that seems mundane at the time, but really kind of shapes their identity, teaches them something about the world. It's also a situation where they faced anticipation and then disappointment. So things didn't pan out how they thought they would. And it's stories that allow us to kind of see the world through the lives of a young person. So my activity for these stories is going to focus on that sense of an experience of disappointment and what you learned from it, how you adapted to that. So we will have 2 discussion boards this week on the in the class. One is a proposal for your topic, and the other is a comparison between Araby and A and P. So once I have some of those discussion posts collected, we're going to use that as kind of the basis for our class discussion. I'll go through and break down the stories, kind of more specifically. Just a brief introduction to Araby. Araby was written by James Joyce. James Joyce, an early 20th century Irish author. This story appears in a collection called The Dubliners. So he was from Dublin, and he's writing about people based on people that he knew and families that he knew. So this is life in lower to middle class Dublin. These are working people living in a kind of a city kind of caught between the old and the new. So this is a city that has industrialized, still maintains kind of its older character. I mean, if you go to Dublin today, there are no skyscrapers in Dublin. Like, you're not allowed to build buildings over a certain height. So it has kind of still an older quality to it, even though it's you're surrounded by the modern world and modern conveniences. It's definitely not like going to New York City or Chicago or even London or something like that. Anyway, this is a story about this young boy. He lives with his aunt and uncle. So something happened to his parents. We don't quite know what. He is young. He's growing up. He becomes attracted to his friend's sister. He very much wants to impress her, and so the story is all about how he tries to do that. It's a kind of relatable story at kind of that awkward stage of pursuing romantic encounters for people, and so it's kind of relatable in that sense. And then, like I said, this theme of anticipation and disappointment will be what's emphasized here. A and P, a story from several decades later, written by an American named John Updike. And in that story, again, it's about a young person. He's a little older, and it's a story that deals with someone's first job. And a lot of relatable things there. He has a boss who's kind of a overbearing and a stickler for rules, and he has there's kind of a mundane quality to his job of being a cashier. But he too becomes infatuated. This young woman and her friends come in. He kind of notices them, and he sees them be mistreated by his boss, and so he decides that he's going to stand up for them. But it doesn't play out, how he imagined. And then there's some sense that he's going to have to reflect on this aftermath of quitting his job, and what he's going to do from there. So we will, in our class discussion next time, kind of bring those 2 elements together. I will have this lecture that you're watching posted along with the discussion boards for this week. And we will on Wednesday go through those. I'll read some of those to the class, offer some of my perspectives, and we'll talk about the next stages of the project. Okay, so that will conclude our recorded portion today here in class. We're going to work on a few things, but I will be in touch through Zoom, and you'll see me on the discussion boards as well.